Welcome to episode 4 of the Vada Studios Confessions podcast. Now, today with me, we have, I suppose you could describe him as an indie legend. I don't want to infer that he's that old, but...
Same age as Eric Morecambe, mate.
Yeah, well, yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in and welcome Mr. Simon Fowler from Ocean Colour Scene.
Hi, Matt. Nice to be here, pal. And this is sort of indie legend. This is like an Indian legend, isn't it? Like an Indian restaurant. It's beautiful.
A flock wallpaper.
We're in Matt's shed. Extraordinary.
Yes, welcome to my shed.
Yeah, you should see his hoe.
So we've had a working relationship for 12 years now. I mean, the very first time we worked together was when we did the album Paintings, which was the last and the 10th studio album by Ocean Colour Scene. And then ever since then, we've done all sorts of things together, from doing a bit of demoing for potentially the new album that you're currently working on. At the moment, sort of produced by Steve. And then, of course, most recently, we did the mix on the new live album with you and Oscar live from Oran.
That's right, yeah. From Oran Moor, yeah.
Oran Moor, which is fantastic. So we have done a lot together. Now, the interesting thing is that a lot of people who I've had on this podcast, you know, they do actually love the recording process. They embrace it. They kind of choose to be in the studio as often as possible. Whereas you're someone who doesn't necessarily embrace that.
No, I've always been I'm just useless with technology. I mean, as soon as I touch my phone, something goes wrong with it. I mean, you've got a sort of a smallish setup here. Well, when we started off, obviously you used to have those giant 24-track desks and whatnot. And Steve and Damon, they took to it like a ducks to water, really. Steve's got his own lovely setup. It's a bit like a bigger version of this, actually, just with more photographs of the Supremes. and more guitars, a lot more guitars.
Yes, I thought so, yeah.
So he's produced now, he's just produced Leah Weller, Paul's daughter, and he produced a couple of years ago a really, like a double album, really, for P.P. Arnold, which is sumptuously done, and he loves that bit. It means nothing to me at all.
No.
I'm a strummer and a singer, and I guess my forte is live. It doesn't interest me.
So the whole stage of your career, there's never been a point where there was one particular album that you sort of felt more creatively connected with in the production process, or did you just...
Not really. I mean, it was initially, it would be largely me and Steve who would be in the studio back in the days when we was at a guy called Bob Lamb's studio, which was in Birmingham. Bob was the guy who produced the first Ep.4 album, Signing Off. And he was the drummer with Steve Gibbons' band. And he was an old hippie, great guy. So I would write the songs, and then Steve and I would record them. And I would be there for that process. But really, once we got to doing Moseley Shoals proper, it was Max Hayes and Brendan Lynch, who was the it was all down to them really, so which is why actually, I mean, Moseley Shoals doesn't really sound remotely like we sound live. Really, it's far too sophisticated.
So was that the first time? The first album was like self-produced then, would you say, or joint produced with Bob Lamb?
No, those were the demos. The first album was initially produced by Jimmy Miller,
right?
Who, of course, the Rolling Stones guy, who was a great guy, a great drinker, but was sacked, which I had to tell him about in Birmingham, and I picked him up to lend him some money. Extraordinary. It was in Spark Hill, which is a largely Asian area where they got a Federal Express. And I was sitting in it's a restaurant now. It was called the Antelope, a boozer with some broken down Irish guys and some Indian guys. at 11:30 in the morning having a beer with the guy who produced the Rolling Stones. And I remember thinking, I'll never know again, think of what is round the corner, because I have got Beggar's Banquet and his name is written in italics on the front cover. And here I am, having told him he's sacked, buying him a beer in Spark Hill. Jesus Christ.
Was that halfway through the record?
It was no, I mean, God, it just went on, and then we got a guy called Hugo Nicholson. I can't remember what happened to I don't know how much we did. It's a long time ago. And eventually the guy called Tim Palmer was brought in, and Tim finished it off. Tim had famously turned down Nevermind by Nirvana.
Right.
But he did get sort of the last laugh, because he did the next album he did was the Pearl Jam album.
Oh, that sold a few.
Which I think at the time actually outssold Nevermind.
Oh, did it? 10?
Probably no longer. I don't know nothing about Pearl Jam.
You're not a grunge boy?
They got the wrong hair.
You're not a grunge boy?
Nah, not really. I like Nirvana.
Yeah.
Anyone who doesn't like Teen Spirit really should not be talking about music.
No. I agree. And actually, I'm surprised. It's taken me as surprised that you like that record.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's one of the most exciting records ever made.
Have you heard the whole all the way through Nevermind in its completion?
Oh, I'm sure I have years ago, but I don't own it. But no, I remember thinking that it was great. But you see, I like the people who really were that Nirvana came from. I mean, I'm sure they would probably cite Neil Young as their sort of godfather, and Neil Young's my hero, and I love the Stooges, and I didn't like the MC5. I thought they were hugely overrated, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, the Stooges and Neil Young mixed together is Nirvana, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, so when you sit down to write a song and you're inspired, it's again, I know you don't use computers.
No, I use a Sony cassette player, circa 1972 style.
Well, I remember when we first started working together on paintings, and we had a kind of a pre-production meeting, and you came to the studio and you said, yes, I've got some demos, and then you pulled this, I think it was a W.H. Smith's own brand cassette recorder out, and you would fast forward.
No, I think it's probably a Sony, because you have to have the tape counter.
And you had all your tape counter bits marked.
Yeah. Otherwise you don't know where you are.
Yeah.
You're totally lost. So it has to have a tape counter. And I'll tell you what's amusing now is try to buy a cassette off a young shop assistant. They haven't got a Scooby, is what you're talking about.
So this very day, when you write a song,
it'll be on cassette,
and you'll just get out the cassette recorder in your living room.
That's right. And now I had actually a great Christmas present. I haven't actually used it yet. No doubt I'll have great difficulty in learning how to use it. But what it basically does is turns your cassette recording into an
MP3.
An MP3. Yeah, an MP3. And then you can transfer that then directly to a computer. So somebody like you or Craddock has then got all that they need. Mm-hmm. They've got the song.
Right.
You see, the idea of sending cassettes down to Steve, number one, you would lose the cassette unless you made multiple copies.
Yeah.
But number two, I doubt whether he's got a cassette recorder, and I doubt whether you can actually buy one in Devon.
So,
having said that, Devon, maybe you can. You can probably get a Nickelodeon in Devon.
Yeah. So who, if you don't mind me asking, who bought you this device?
It was my partner's brother.
Oh, brilliant!
Yeah, Ian Hayes.
Oh, brilliant!
And it's quite possibly the most useful present that I've had since Munich 1974 Sabutio.
Well, I mean, that says it all. I find it quite exciting. I mean, I can imagine Steve was more thrilled than anybody. The fact that he'd be able to now. You haven't used it yet?
No.
It's 4 months after Christmas.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're only third way through the year, aren't we?
No, you should get on that. But no, I think it's brilliant that you've always used that whole... the songwriting element has been the same. And
well, I find it so instant, you see. It's basically, you've got it on play and record with the pause button down.
Mm-hmm.
And you la-la-la-ding away, and suddenly something pulls off. And now, if I was messing around with the computer, by the time I'd got everything set up like that, I'd probably have
Lost the idea.
lost it. I did try a dictaphone once, but quite frankly, they're useless.
Mm-hmm.
They're useless. But what you have to remember is, if anyone else listening writes in this manner, do not leave the pause button on when you drunkenly leave at night, because it runs out the motor. And my music room, it's like a Sony tape cassette graveyard. There must be half a dozen dead Sony cassette players.
So, I mean, when this next one goes, then what's going to happen?
You can still get them. I think Argus do them.
Oh, do they?
Yep.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
But I went to Asda Living in Stratford-upon-Avon to get the cassettes, and the young guy said, no, we haven't got them. So I was going down the escalator, and this guy taps me on the shoulder, and it's the security man. I thought, oh. He said, follow me. He said, we have got them. So I must have bought about 50 of them. I thought, these are not going to exist for much longer.
How much are they?
I can't remember. I probably bought every available cassette in Stratford-upon-Avon, I'd imagine.
I could just see your music room, like just piled up.
Yeah.
So is that where you go to focus on music? So if you write, do you write anywhere around the house, or do you go?
No, like in that room.
You will only go in that room.
Yeah.
So you've got your process.
I mean, I used to write basically really very late at night, probably after coming back from the pub or the club in Birmingham. And I'd write into the night. Well, I don't do that anymore because, quite frankly, I'm in bed by 10 o'clock for the World Tonight on Radio 4.
Well, you are 57.
58.
58.
Same age as Eric.
When he died.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, you would never write anywhere else. I mean, what about in the olden days?
Well, that's what my tape player and my guitar is, and it's sort of got nice Beatles photograph in there, and a reproduction of a Bruegel, the younger painting, trepanning it's called. People getting their heads drilled.
All right. Very inspiring.
Medieval Belgian garb. That's quite inspiring.
Right, and this is where all these beautiful songs come from.
Yeah.
So recently, there was a book, and I had to digitize for part of that project a load of kind of lost demos.
Yeah, that was right. They were on a cassette that Daniel Rachel had, which I'd made and given to his mother.
Yeah.
When I was about 18, 19 years old. So some of those songs go back. I written them. There's one that I do live called Foxy's Folk Face. I wrote that when I was 16.
Right.
Which is like 32 years ago, which is slightly terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was funny when we were listening to those. I mean, you hadn't heard some of those songs for...
No, I hadn't. I hadn't heard them since I recorded them. And as soon as I heard them, I remembered them.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, because they're pretty strong melodically, aren't they? Some of the lyrics are pretty 18-year-old learning to write songs.
Some of them, it was interesting to see how some of them evolved later on into well-known Ocean Colour Colour Scene songs.
That's right, yeah.
But when we were digitizing it and I was going through them, it was interesting for me to think that this was you in your youth, and yet these kind of demos were exactly the same sort of demos that you were playing to me when we went in to do paintings. Which I think with a lot of songwriters, I think they always try new things after particularly over a lengthy career, and they will try and deviate from their pattern in order to try and find a new inspiration or what have you. And you've never done that. You've always stuck to the...
I just strum, open my mouth and see what happens, so it comes out. I mean, I've become a much better singer-songwriter, but that's inevitable, I think, isn't it? Because it's like most things. It's like doing it, I mean, the first songs I started writing were about, when I was about 13, 14, I started writing songs, and they were about sort of cocaine busts and whores.
Right. That's what that means. Yeah. That's writing from experience,
exactly.
Obviously.
Yeah. That's what it's like growing up in Solihull.
Although, you've said the recording process has never been something you've sort of really enjoyed? You said in the early days that you were very much with Steve the whole time in the studio.
Yeah.
I guess in a production role. Now you had your own studio at one point, didn't you, in Moseley?
Oh yeah, we did. Well, after Bob's, yeah, we went to one in Five Ways, Birmingham city centre, and then we took over the upstairs. And I mean, it was huge, our studio, which I spent most of my time. Once I'd laid down the initial track that Steve and Damon would start working on it, Oscar and I would invariably be upstairs playing table tennis.
Did you end up getting
pretty good?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could beat him about twice in every 10.
Yeah, he's a remarkable sportsman.
Yeah, yes. I mean, he beat me once playing snooker using his left hand standing on one leg.
Yeah, I've never beaten him at snooker. I played him at golf. He's exceptional at golf.
Yeah.
He's one of those evil people. So what, you'd lay the sort of guide track down with Oscar first, and then...
No, probably on my own. And you see, the other, or actually, I'd probably get Steve to play the guitar on it, because you normally want to lay something down to a click track.
Yeah.
And as you know from painful experiences, I cannot play to a click track.
No.
I'm too used to reading the song and telling the song by speeding up and slowing down sometimes.
Yeah. And sometimes that's necessary.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of songwriter you are. I think your songs require that.
Yeah, but it makes it a nightmare to then put down the drums, doesn't it? You know, in fact, it's almost impossible.
It's sometimes quite difficult, yeah. But, right, so the moment the core of your song was down, you didn't really stick around an awful lot.
Not really. No, I mean, yeah, I'd be hanging around because we'd be there probably every day. So you also have to remember that we had got nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Also, we used to have some recreational supplies.
Yes.
Continually in the studio. And that was our life. I would write 2 songs a night so that Steve and I, and then Damon would come in, Oscar would come in, would have something to do the following day. You know, because none of us had got jobs. So yeah, it was it was a total lifestyle, to be honest. And now it isn't. Now I've got my life does not revolve around that. It revolves around my life with my partner Robert and the pub.
Yeah.
The village pub, and living in the village where I live. I mean, my dog here, Cooper. Cooper's here.
Who's here?
Cooper.
Hello,
Cooper.
Hello.
He's actually got his own table at our pub. It's called Cooper's Corner.
Right, that's very simple.
And it is reserved for himself and his owner.
Right.
And his owner's friends.
Right. That's
genuinely. It's got a little plaque on it.
And he's here in the studio as well.
He is. He's got a little photograph of him on the side of the pub.
He's actually got a photograph of him.
Yep.
In the
yes, seriously. Yeah. He's staring at us now intently. We're talking about you.
Yeah, we're talking about
Woof.
You. Yeah. If only you could see him now. He's a cutie. So how long did you have that studio? Was that the Moseley Shoals?
The Moseley Shoals one.
Well, did you write all of Moseley Shoals?
No, most of it. Most of Moseley Shoals was probably written before. Oh dear, it's hard to. I find it difficult to think in terms of time spans. Which, when you're talking about 20 odd years ago, most of it, a lot of the songs were worked on at Bob's. Probably most of them. And I can't remember how long it was that we started actually recording Moseley Shoals with Max and Brendan at the one in Sherborne Street, 5 Ways. I'm pretty sure that we started recording it with them there. You actually recorded it at your own studio? Yeah. Oh, so you had some nice gear. I mean, I'd ask you what gear it is. I don't know what it was, but I'll tell you who gave it us. It was incredibly generous of him. It was Andy McDonald. From what's the record label called? Independiente? Was it?
I'm not sure.
He had Billy Bragg and he had lots of people. He's really influential, and he'd got this lovely house in Turnham Green, Chiswick, and he'd got I think a 24-track desk, which he said we could have.
I mean, back then that would have been a lot of money.
And when we went and got it, he said, you better have the tape machine to go with it as well. So he gave us that.
Wow.
For free, just gave it to us as a gift. And without that, it may not have happened in the way that it did. So a lot of it's thanks to Andy McDonald, if you ever use this.
What happened to that console, that mixing?
I've got no idea. I don't know whether that's the one that ended up at Moseley Shoals or not.
Mm.
You'd have to ask Steve, I think, about this. I really can't remember.
Yeah.
You might realise as we go on in this interview that my memory is actually diabolical.
Well, it's
I blame the 90s.
It's well of that. Yeah.
I blame Steve.
Steve. Well, he's the ringleader of everything. Any trouble, it's always Steve's fault.
Oh, it is, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think he's taken us all down.
It wasn't me.
So, yeah, you had that studio for, what, a couple of years? Or
I think possibly longer than that. But it wasn't... It wouldn't be more than 4 or 5. I wouldn't have thought. It was compulsory purchased of us.
How was it?
By the council. It's now office blocks.
So you bought the property as well?
Yeah.
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 That
I think
seems like...
we must have bought that partly with the money that we were to sign on to MCA. It must have been round about that time.
Yeah. So, what would you say now? I mean, obviously, going forward, about to do a new Ocean Colour Scene record. What would you say your personal perfect environment is to make a record? What do you want? What do you look for if you obviously we've said that you're not overly keen on the studio. It's not one of your natural environments. Yeah. So what would you look for when you're making a record now?
I would like to know that there's a very nice gastropub within walking distance.
Right.
And the rest I would leave to Steve.
And that's that.
Steve's got a really, really cool place. You've never been to Steve's, have you?
I haven't. I've seen pictures on Instagram.
It's fantastic.
It looks amazing.
I mean, it really is lovely. It's got this kind of vibe. Like it's very. As soon as you walk in, you know that there's only one person on the planet who could have put that studio together.
Yeah.
He's got a drum kit in there. He's got a sort of a baby grand, and he uses. I think he's got sort of machines, but I think he records. I'm sure he records partly on a laptop.
I mean, as far as I know, Steve works on Logic, as a recording software.
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Yeah.
That would be logical.
Yeah. I would have thought I would guess he have a tape machine, because
I've got no idea. A tape machine?
Yeah, reel to reel.
No, I don't think so. I don't think anyone has anymore.
Oh no, some people do. Some people do.
Yeah, and he actually uses a razor blade to splice it. God, I mean, that was what a stroke of genius that was to be able to do that.
That's how I started.
Yeah.
with Dave Morris.
Did you remember And the Slave?
Yeah,
you started with Dave.
Yeah, that was the person that first ever taught me how to.
God, I must know that. I've probably forgotten.
in the old workshop studios in Redditch.
Goodness me, yeah, that's where the Fanatics made their record.
Oh right. Yeah.
Back in 88 or 89. It went out on Chapter 22, which was run by a guy, Craig Jennings, who's now a bigwig, isn't he?
We do a lot of work. We do a lot of work with Craig now.
Do you?
Yeah, because he's part of the it's Craig Jennings and
do you speak to him?
Don Jenkins, who yeah, I do.
I'll say hello.
I will. Raw Power. And we've had a lot of their artists come through the studio and have a great relationship with them. I've joked with Craig a few times that when I was about 15, I just used to send my demo every week to Chapter 22, and I never got a reply. And one day we had lunch, and I was telling him this story, and he became really apologetic. He was like, "Oh, we always try to go," and I had to point out that actually my band was shit. That's probably why the reason.
Yeah, I actually interviewed Craig when I was a journalist on the Solihull News.
Wow.
Went round to his house, which was, if my memory serves me well, it was in Damson Wood, which is where Steve lived.
Right.
Yeah, and interviewed him when he was at Chapter 22.
Well, Chapter 22 was like a really important record label back then, and I mean, obviously he managed Pop Police itself
That's
as
right,
well,
yeah.
which an incredible band that were well ahead of the game. Yeah, so I mean, the old days with Dave Morris, I mean, that's where I sort of cut my teeth, and funnily enough, you know, I mean, I think a lot of Midlands bands went there. The Wonder Stuff recorded their first single,
Yeah, they did.
Unbearable, there.
They did, yeah. He's not with us anymore, is he?
Dave, no, he sadly passed away. I'm going to say 5 years ago, but I think it might have been longer.
10, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I know this is what happens when you get to Eric Morecambe's age.
Yeah.
And then you pass away.
Well, this is it. I'm going to be 50 this year, so
Are you?
I'm catching you up.
Bloody whippersnapper. I remember being 50.
I remember.
That's when it used to snow at winter. Christmas Day, you're out in our clogs.
The good old days. The good old days. But no, a lot of bands went through there. I mean, that was one of the big sort of Midlands stories, I think, in the early days of that. The Ocean Colour Scene never recorded there, did they?
No, we didn't. No, that was the Fanatics. So that was me, Damon, and two people who were in the Fanatics before, the drummer before Oscar and the guitar player. And basically, Oscar joined the Fanatics, and then we dissolved. I was mates with Steve. I'd played with his band a few times, and that's what basically the Fanatics got in Steve, and we became Ocean Colour Scene.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. From all the Midlands bands, then you were probably the only ones that didn't, as Ocean Colour Scene, didn't actually end up with Dave. But one thing you and I do have in common is that we were both managed by Eddie Lynn at the time.
Oh, shall we? Yes, moving on.
Moving on briefly. But
start off at the station, end at the station.
Ears in a bag.
Yeah.
Say nothing.
Yeah. Melody, not volume, Simon. Yeah, old saying.
Yes, moving along. So I was going to ask you your best, most magical moment in the studio, and then, of course, your worst time and moment in the studio. And I always ask everybody this.
I don't know, to be honest. I can't think of the worst time in the studio.
I mean, I'd say, obviously, I think the best time in the studio is probably when you made a record with me.
I'm trying to think whether... I mean, quite frankly, it's probably the best time I had in the studio is when I was off my head on acid with Steve.
What record was that?
I remember we listened to Axis Boulder's Love by Hendrix, and at one point, the music just seemed to sweep across the room and shoot up to Jesus.
Right. That
was a pretty good moment.
That's a pretty special studio moment.
I can't think of any horrible moments in the studio, to be honest. No, not really. I guess that I don't know whether there'd be horrible moments because we'd be doing something, and when you're doing something, we've been fortunate. It's been normally pretty productive and has gone well. I mean, I love being in Paul Weller's studio when we were with Jimmy Miller. I mean, that was great fun because suddenly number one was with Weller, and we got the Rolling Stones producer. And we were in London.
Big deal for a Midlands band.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah,
it was real.
Yeah.
You know, the album sank without a trace. It must have taken on and off 3 years to make that album. It was a nightmare, and by the time it came out, everybody was into Nirvana anyway.
Mm. Did you enjoy Moseley Shoals? Was that a good period?
Yeah, I think so. But you must remember that we hadn't got any idea that it was going to be popular.
Yeah,
I mean, it was actually meant to be Japan release only, on a label called Pony Canyon.
Wow.
It's going to be 15,000 copies printed up for Japan only.
How many copies has it sold now, do you know?
About 1.3 million.
Wow.
So that's better than 50. And I don't know what happened to that Pony Canyon label, because I think it got something to do with Paul. That Paul was going to do something with Pony Canyon, and he never did either. So I don't know what happened there. And then obviously Johnny Walsh came along to the studio when we was recording, and Johnny was a big Paul Weller fan. So rather brilliantly, Chris Craddock, our manager, had arranged that Paul would be recording with us when Johnny turned up at the studio, and we basically were signed on the spot then.
Perfect.
Well done, Chris.
Yeah.
And you know, the rest is what happened. I mean, Chris Evans picked up on it. That without Chris picking up on it, nothing would have happened. Played it for 2 weeks as his record of the week on Radio 1, you know, in the morning. That went in the charts at 15. I think the following week or a couple of weeks after, the album came in, went in at number 2 and stayed there for 6 months.
Wow.
So the whole thing was never really meant to have happened like that, and it was just what happened.
That's always how those fairy tales pan out. It's always
It's like ending up with Jimmy Miller at 11:30 drinking in Spark Hill. You don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah, you really don't. You really don't. I mean, it must feel pretty special as a songwriter, especially the kind of songwriter you are and the people that have inspired you, to occasionally sit there and know that you have written a really important, classic, seminal record. Do you ever think that? Do you ever sort of just...
I think we knew that it was good, but I'll tell you what, when we felt most at ease was when we went in to do Marching Already.
Right.
And people said, yeah, I bet you feel under pressure. I said, no, I don't actually, because quite frankly, I haven't got the pressure of thinking that no one's ever going to hear this. Because I know that they will. Because now we're quite a big band, and that album went straight in at number 1.
Right, yeah.
And that was, yes,
Yeah.
knocked Oasis off number 1, didn't it? Only for a week, to be fair to those scallies.
Well, there was a year that I would say, with Ocean Colour Scene and Oasis were the same size.
we're the second biggest selling band in Britain that year.
Yeah, which is,
Yeah.
that's a pretty tall
And that was the
feat.
year that we played Nebworth. So when we played Nebworth, I mean, everybody was singing Day We Caught the Train, 125,000 hands in the air, clapping along to Oh La La La. So it wasn't like we were unknown at that point. We were on that bill for a reason.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't have sold the tickets.
Exactly. But that must feel pretty special.
There it was. I can't remember the gig. I can't remember the gig at all.
Were you pissed?
Apart from the beginning, no. I remember the beginning. I was petrified. Incidentally, this is all in my book, One for the Road. Chris Craddock was holding. He'd got a cine camera, and I said, "Give me that. What do you do?" He said, "Just press that button." And I walked to the front of the stage, and I filmed the crowd, and they responded. And I thought, I remember that. I remember the Day We Caught the Train at the end with our hands in the air, and I don't remember anything in between.
Yeah.
I actually did I did an interview when it was it the 25th or the 30th anniversary, 25th perhaps. I did an interview on Radio 5 with Adrian Chiles, and halfway through the interview he said, "You're a rubbish interviewer, you are. You can't remember a thing." I thought, well, fair point, mate.
I think you're doing all right. Yeah. But yeah, it's funny. I mean, it was the 90s, and it was, I think if you talk to a lot of artists in that period of time that were having great success, also came with it just a whirlwind of excess. And
yeah, it did.
It's of the time.
I mean, it was, and a lot of it was also, it wasn't just the bands, it was the record label guys as well, who were all kind of our age. And
they had it on expenses. They could go out and buy you a bag of Coke and put it on expenses.
Right. And I think partly that, I think John Harris, who writes I used to know John as a journalist. He came to my house once. He now writes a regular column for The Guardian, which is a very good column. And he wrote a book called About Britpop and Blair, so like the end of the party. It was something like that. And I think that the powers that be pulled the plug on the party. And that's when suddenly the bands started to dwindle and the solo act started to come along, and they were Simon Cowell type music. And I think that the record labels thought, you know what, we've had enough of this. And they took control. And of course things go in cycles as well. And also people who stay up all night grow up. And especially when they have children. I say I tend to go to bed now, and we used to go out.
Yeah.
And the idea of going out now to Snobs or Sweat Club in Birmingham with a bag of speed, it just horrifies me.
Yeah. You're pretty clean living these days.
Yeah.
Just the occasional jar.
Very, very, very occasional. On every occasion I can. At Cooper's Corner.
At Cooper's Corner, every time. So, one thing I'm curious about...
It's an album name, that, isn't it? Cooper's Corner.
Is that the new Ocean Colour Scene album?
Could be, couldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, give that one a whirl with Steve.
Well, he's got a dog called Noodles.
So
Can't be Noodles Corner, can it? Not really.
It would have to be Cooper and Noodles Corner.
Yeah, no. Noodles, it sounds like we're sort of like, I don't know, pussyfooting by by Eno and Robert Fripp. Noodling.
Yeah, but you dog owners, you get all, there's no way, being two dog owners, one dog would be allowed to be more famous than the other one. That's never going to happen.
No. Noodles is quite a famous rock dog, actually. I mean, he goes to all the festivals. He's been on many, many stages.
Has he?
Oh, yeah, I think he's been on stage at Glastonbury. Yeah.
Doesn't surprise me.
Well, he's there at the side with Sally.
Yeah. So, one last question. I'm curious. Out of this incredible career that you've had, what is your favourite album of yours to listen to now?
The B-sides.
Right.
Well, number one, it's got more songs in it than the others. And I think the B-sides album represents me personally closer to me as what I am in terms of my musicality. I say Mosey Shoals, to me, sounds very much like Max and Brendan are practically in the band.
Right.
It sounds like Max and Brendan's album. Mm-hmm. Whereas it's basically it's stripped down to invariably me and Steve playing. I mean, I may even play acoustic guitar on some of those songs, for God's sake. No, I don't know if all of them are in time.
Do you still enjoy playing those songs live, though?
Yeah. I mean, Oscar and I are touring at the moment. We're when this comes out, we're touring every Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We're trying to do through April and then May. Mm-hmm. I think May actually might be festival ones, but all of these ones. So we're doing a lot of songs that Ocean Colour Scene wouldn't do, like Best Bet on Chinaski, Chelsea Walk, Last December, Song for the Front Row, which and you see that again, that represents me. Because in the way I write, because basically that's how I write the songs. Yeah.
So, that's a really interesting point. And you'd put that over and above anything solo that you've done, or
I'll tell you what I do like, and I mean they went absolutely nowhere. Are the two Merrymath albums that I did.
Yeah,
I'm very proud of them. I think there's got some of my best recent songs in it. Prometheus is one of my favourite songs I've ever written. And Sweetest Words, that's another one I would play. If I was going out just on my own, I'd try and do some of the songs which I did with Merrymath.
Yeah.
And also, it was a joy to record with Dan Seeley, who is my brother-in-law. No, he's not. Is he my brother-in-law? His sister is married to my little brother. Does that make him brother? No, it's not. Is it? No, it's not. Brother-in-law once removed or something else. Anyway,
like
he also
that.
is a great mate.
Yeah, no, it's nice to work with people.
And we toured, and we had such a laugh touring. And John McCusker came with us, who's one of the best musicians, probably in Britain. He tours the world with Mark Knopfler, so he's quite difficult to get hold of.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Sure, you don't want to come with us to Bedford?
But Mark Knopfler can't be touring for that much longer.
I can't because I'm in Rio with Mark. But he's a great guy, John.
Yeah.
He's one of my favourite people. He's hilarious. And we had some really great, really childish times. I remember once we was travelling up through, we was near Gretna Green, and we was making up rude names for rude words involving pop stars. And just out of nowhere, this is how childish it was, but how fun it was in a very blokes haven't left the playground manner.
Yeah.
When Dan Seeley just said, Fanny Lennox.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm rather hoping that this is a game now that's going to be picked up by people that are listening, and then
it's
will
the type
take
of thing that you used to do as kids, you know, when you're going on a 5-hour car journey. Are we nearly there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Count the colours of the cars.
I've got a similar game, but with the name Jeff. So you replace famous band names with Jeff. So Jeff from Above, Mega Jeff,
Jefferson Airplane.
Jeff.
Oh, no,
that doesn't. No, that's already done. Yeah,
that's my middle name, Jeffrey.
Is it?
Yeah, my dad's name's Jeffrey, but with a G.
And are you with a G or a J?
Yeah, with a G.
Oh, you're both with Gs.
Yeah.
Well, Simon, thank you so much for coming on the show.
It was a pleasure. I'm glad that I've left you with that Fanny Lennox.
It's a
story.
game. It's a game I'm going to be playing.
Isn't that dreadful and pathetic? Thank you, Matt.
I think it's great, but then again, it's that's childish,
good
sense of humour of a musician, isn't it? But no, thank you so much.
That's been a pleasure, mate.
And good luck with the rest of the tour.
Thank you very much.
And speak to you hopefully very soon.
Yep. Yeah, grand. Thank you.